Before we get into other issues around education, for me, like children come first and foremost. And I
Yeah.
think I speak on behalf of a lot of teachers when we say how hard and difficult it is when we are seeing day to day the impact of cost of living is having. I think we're now at a point where it's 4.5 million children are in relative poverty. And it's teachers that are seeing the true impacts of that. And I think there's a real issue around the sort of moral distress of that, where teachers can see that it's so incredibly hard for students, but there's not a lot they can actually do about it. So I suppose first and foremost is, what do you feel Labour are going to be able to do to improve that issue? Children coming to school and they've not been fed, not been clothed, like you mentioned, the housing crisis, and it's almost schools have become the only place families can turn to for any sort of help. So how do you foresee things outside of education being able to help with that pressure and that issue?
So I think it's where the role for government comes in responding to some of those wider challenges. So, for example, on housing, um, ending so much of the insecurity that people experience in the private rented market that sees families forced to move around, children's education disrupted, long journeys to school where they've had to move far away or having to switch school mid-year because of, you know, the failures around the private rented sector, and the fact that so many families can't at the moment buy their own home and have that security when that's what they would like. Child poverty scars communities, blight slides, and that's why a Labour government will have a commitment to work to tackle child poverty, to do that across government. Some of the practical steps that we've been setting out are things like universal free breakfast clubs in all primary schools, which we will fund properly to make sure that schools are able to deliver them. The argument for that is partly a cost of living support for families at the moment, but I also think all of the wider benefits that will come of improved attendance, behaviour, academic outcomes, children having that softer start to the school day, especially coming out of the pandemic when so many children haven't had all of those rich experiences of spending time with their friends. And I've seen some fantastic examples of breakfast clubs around the country that enable and facilitate that. But I do completely recognise that at the moment it can feel like a pretty lonely place to be when you're having to deal with all of these wider pressures that families are facing. And I hear so many stories of teachers and staff, putting their hands in their pocket to pay for things, to support children, washing clothes, extra food banks operating from schools. I mean, it is amazing that people do that. And I think it is testament to the drive, determination, and passion that people bring to wanting to support children to get a great start in life. But I think it should not be required because it should not be necessary, and families should have enough money to get by on without having to depend upon the generosity of strangers.